And we should be live. So, hello everyone, and welcome to the first panel of this year's QuaranCon. If you haven't already, be sure you visit our artist alley that's at QuaranCon2020.com because we truly believed optimistically that we were only going to have one quarantine convention. So this panel, I am really excited to be talking to a bunch of the finalists. I think 7 of the 10 finalists from this year's SPFBO. So for those not playing the home game, SPFBO stands for Self-Published Fantasy Blog Off. This is a competition founded by fantasy author Mark Lawrence, and it has a really cool structure that allows for a lot of good books to get critical feedback, if not full reviews. So the setup is that there are 300 entries of self-published fantasy books, and there are 10 judges or judging teams. Each judge or judging team is assigned 10 books, and then over the course of months, those are narrowed down to 10 finalists. So each judge or judging team selects a finalist and then those 10 entries are then reviewed by all 10 judges. And once the scores are all in, they're added up and we find out who's the winner. So we're currently in the finalist judging process. So I'm here with 7 authors who are on the chopping block, which is exciting. I won last year's SPFBO, which is why I'm here talking to these lovely folks instead of somebody who's in general better at talking. So to start us off, I'm going to have you guys go in whatever order you choose and tell us a little bit about yourself and your SPFBO entry this year.
Shall I go first then? I guess
you can go first.
Yeah.
So hi, I'm Rachel Emma Shaw. My entry is Last Memoria, which is a dark fantasy book that's about memory thieves. That it's exploring what makes us in terms of our identity when memory loss is such a thing that's in our society, but even worse when you've got memory thieves out there stealing them. And I absolutely love writing dark fantasy that pulls on the emotional heartstrings. So don't look to me for happy endings in my books.
I've read it. I can confirm.
Did I make you cry, Zack?
Just in my heart, not in my face. I guess I'll go since I'm already making snide comments. So I'm Captain America, as we can tell. Justin is my doppelganger. No, I'm Zack Argyle, and I'm the author of Voice of War. And the story for Voice of War is it's about 3 characters and kind of how they deal with the chaos that begins around them and ends up kind of changing the world, and then how they deal with that. So it's kind of epic fantasy, sword and sorcery, fun magic system, nice and colorful and bright, and it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Happier ending than Rachel's, I'd say.
Not
Slightly.
much. Not much.
but more happy.
Marginally?
Yeah,
little bit?
Marginally, yeah.
Okay, well, I haven't read any of them yet, so just maybe cool it on the spoilers. But but Robert, did you want to tell us about your title?
Sure. And
right, we're not doing very well with this introduction thing, are we? I think you need to tag someone when you're done.
I'll go next. I'm Robert H. Fleming, author of The Fall Over Line, my finalist entry for this year. It is a military fantasy, probably best to describe it as flintlock fantasy, which means there's gunpowder weapons instead of just swords and axes and the normal kind of Tolkien-esque fantasy world. It was inspired by the fall of Napoleonic France. I wanted to tell a story of individual characters experiencing the fall of an empire. It is a 4-book series, completed series. Book 4 launched back in January. So the Falling Empire series is the full story and no spoilers, as ML said.
Hey guys, my name is Alexander Darwin. I'm the author of the Combat Codes series. The first
I
entry
kind
in
of
that.
feel like my entrants is frozen as usual.
The first entry of the Combat Codes is the entry into SPFBO. It's a very martial arts heavy book. It's been described as like mixed martial arts combined with Harry Potter because there's an academy element. And it may or may not be sci-fi or fantasy. That's part of the mystery. But and ML, feel free to ask a question on that. I know I'm doing a panel specifically on that question later, but I'm glad to talk about that.
Oh, then maybe you can save your material and I can leave it alone. All right, and before we throw to the next person, I totally forgot. If you have a preferred social media, author website, Amazon link you would like to drop in the chat. If you've got YouTube open, you don't have to. That would be fantastic.
I'll go next then.
Yeah,
I'm Justin Lee Anderson. My SPFBO entry is The Lost War, which is a epic fantasy mystery road trip conspiracy mashup of a thing. It's based in it's a very sword and sorcery sort of thing. The characters are based on characters that friends and I role played for a lot of years, and the world it's set in is based on the history and the mythology and etymology of Edinburgh, my hometown. So it's got quite a Scottish flavour to it as well.
Awesome.
Sounds awesome. I'll go next, shall I? I'm Shaun Paul Stevens. My entry is Netherlight. It's sprawling epic fantasy, dark and gritty. Basically, it's a story of an young immigrant that escapes a war, travels to a new country, and basically all hell breaks loose. There's a hidden magic which is exploding. He becomes the center of that. It's got loads of different fantasy elements, lots of fighting and ships and lots of sparkly magic, and it's very intense, kind of deep, dark, introvert magic based on probability. It's quite complex, I'll put it that way. And I live in Brighton in the UK, and I've got a cat and 2 kids and a wife.
Excellent. And Patrick.
Right. If I look like I'm not responding to things, 2 explanations. One is I have an appalling internet connection living in a small town, and the other reason is sometimes I just drift off. So if I'm not responding, it's one of those. My entry is called Shadow of a Dead God, and I'm prepared, so I actually have a copy here.
With the new cover art.
With the new cover art, yeah. It's kind of an epic fantasy mystery. It's got a slight feel of an urban fantasy, but set in an epic fantasy world. And there's quite a bit of swearing, some incompetent maging, and and various murders.
Excellent.
Murder.
So now that you know all of our SPFBO finalists, I'm gonna be saying SPFBO a lot because it's so much easier than saying all the letters. That's too much for my lispy tongue.
Rachel says, "No, don't do it."
Sorry. It's goofy, but it's easier for me to say. So the people we're missing, I feel I should mention, are Susanna Rowntree, who wrote A Wind from the Wilderness, and Michael R. Fletcher, who wrote Blackstone Heart, and Matt Larkin, who wrote Darkness Forged. So they unfortunately couldn't be here due to time zones. Time zones are the worst. But yeah, those are the other 3 of our 10 finalists. So those of you here, I know some of you have participated in fiction competitions prior to SPFBO, Rachel.
Thank you.
Can you speak at all to that experience, what it was like for you, for as far as networking, as far as your career, and how it maybe compares to this experience?
Who has?
I haven't.
I entered SPFBO 2 years ago, and sorry, Rachel. and with my first book, Carpe Diem, which is a completely different book, and people who have come to me from the Lost War have gone and read Carpe Diem and said it's like it was written by a completely different author, which I don't know if that's a good thing or not. But it bombed out very early on in SPFBO 4. It's a comedy urban fantasy. It's really not very much like the Lost War at all, and it was I was out before I even knew I was out with that one. So I kind of, what that did was not a great deal, really. It didn't do enough to put me off putting the Lost War in this year, I suppose, so that's a good thing. But other than that, the only competition I've been involved in was actually the audiobook of Carpe Diem won an audio award in 2018, and I had nothing to do with that. I have a separate publisher for my audiobooks, and they put it in, and the first I heard about it was when the narrator tweeted that he'd been shortlisted for the award, and I was like, great, that's right.
There's definitely a theme with you about you not hearing about things until it happened.
Yeah, either I'm not paying attention or people are ignoring me. I'm not sure which one it is, but either way. So yeah, and then we won, and it was like, wow, cool, what an award. I knew nothing about this award existing. So I haven't really entered anything other than SPFBO earlier, and I guess this is kind of, I don't know, I was going to say third time lucky, but it was first time lucky that I didn't even know about it. So it's kind of, it's just, I've gone from one extreme to the other with SPFBO, definitely. Like being one of the first books cut to being one of the last books in is pretty cool.
That is cool. You'll be, that'll be an interesting thing to talk about, I think, probably in the future. That will probably be a unique perspective on the competition. I read everyone's bios, and I could swear other people talked about awards, but maybe they're the people who didn't end up able to come. So anybody else have experience with fiction awards?
Patrick, you were in the book nest this year, weren't you?
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, it's kind of like Justin was talking about. It's one of those awards where you don't enter, you know. So I guess my book was in the book nest shortlist, and it didn't win. Michael Fletcher won, I think. And yeah, I mean, to be honest, I didn't really know what was going on much. I think I tweeted out when I saw I was on the list, and that was it. So it's kind of SPFBO I have been following probably too closely for like a couple of years now, and whereas the other one not really.
I think this is the difference, right, between SPFBO and all the other competitions out there. I'm going to do this. This is going to catch on. I'm going to make this catch on, because it creates a community with us. The finalists. The instant you find out you're the finalist, you're all online, quickly connecting. We're like, oh, can we all chat? Can we all, commiserate with the fact that we're all getting butchered in the reviews together? Let's get some companionship. We're building up a community that maybe there are other competitions out there, but a lot of them they don't seem to have this momentum that I know from in your year, like the previous year, you guys have all stayed connected as well. So it's definitely a thing that SPFBO does, is it pulls these authors together, which is really cool.
Yeah, there's some.
Yeah. No, go ahead. Yeah.
I think there's some unique aspects of it that kind of forge that, right? So there's like, first off, the length of the competition. It's very long.
Yeah.
And it's not that, I mean, other than Fantasy Faction, it's not that the reviews happen at the very end, right? Or that just a winner is announced and it's all like some black box and nobody knows how it happens. And that's how most competitions are. So I do have one other award from Indies Today, where they have a fantasy award, and I won the Indies Today Best Fantasy of 2020. I don't think very many people apply to it, so I don't know how good of an award it is. I don't know. But that was just like a black box. You apply, you're in the competition, and then I got notified that I won. And I was like, oh, cool. That's awesome. Whereas SPFBO is, it's ongoing. You get reviews throughout the year from lots of different blogs that like people, like these are all popular blogs that people love to read and watch. And so there's this kind of elongated kind of community building, not even just for us around like the finalists, but like the community itself. People get excited whenever there's a review that comes out and they like to follow along, and it's like this fun event.
Yeah, and I think part of it also takes a long time. If it was all over in a week, I'm not sure there would be much of a community involved. But I don't know about everyone else, but it feels like it's been going on for years for us. It's a,
All I get friends and family being like, is it still going on? Like, what?
The fact that it's
I
like
know.
happened during lockdown and the pandemic as well, it's like it has been going on for several lifetimes now.
Yes.
When it's over, maybe the pandemic will finish, like some kind of magic.
That'd be nice.
It's our fault. Oh no.
I kind of thought that last year. I was like, maybe
Yeah.
the phase will just be over. Yeah, I was stuck at like 3 reviews for months last year, and I thought I would die. I'm glad they've kind of corrected that. I have been following the scoreboard, and I've noticed that everybody has stayed close to the same number of reviews, and I'm like, oh my gosh, thank goodness, because that was so stressful. So like it was stressful for the people who were not getting such positive reviews. Well, and I mean, there's stressful material in there for everybody. Not everybody nobody gets universally positive feedback, but so we'd commiserate about that. But then there was this huge blank all across my row, and that was very anxiety inducing, and I don't know how I would have coped with that without some buddies who were in a similar boat.
But do you think they
so
were
we're just sitting
holding
in a
yours
vacuum.
back?
Go on,
Because
Patrick, sorry.
I was wondering whether they thought, you think they were holding yours back because they kind of, yours was the highest score and they were trying to keep up tension, or whether it was just random?
The intent definitely, there's always an intent to maintain tension until the end. I mean, I've never been part of a judging team. There are other authors who have been on judging teams and have talked about like strategically timing the release of the reviews. Obviously, like, you strategically time any blog content to get engagement. It makes sense. I got a little distressed about how they were only holding mine, because to me it would make the most sense to hold like the top half or the top 3, or like, you know, the ones that were going to be in contention. But yeah, I don't actually know to what extent they planned that. I know it's planned a little bit, but I got very stressed out. So I guess we've already touched on community. There are 3 main things people tend to talk about in terms of potential benefits of entering SPFBO. So a big one is community. That's the one that I always yammer about, because to me that was the most valuable takeaway by far. The next is visibility, and then there's also the opportunity for feedback. So I wanted to ask you guys about visibility, and what do you think, if anything, SPFBO has done in terms of getting your book in front of new readers? Or the right readers. Yeah, just in front of readers.
Yeah, I can.
Oh,
go ahead, Pat.
You go. Sorry.
Yeah, for me, it's been, to be honest, it's been everything. I first released Combat Codes, it was in 2015, so quite a while ago, and I hadn't even really gotten a good jump on the second draft for the second book yet, and I kind of entered on a whim. To be honest, I didn't really know about the competition almost at all, and I really had no connection to the speculative fiction community. So just getting to the semifinals and then to the finals has certainly provided quite a bit of visibility that was not there previously. I mean, I didn't know anything about marketing the book. I just kind of wrote it and put it out there, and I was marketing it towards martial artists because that's kind of my background, and people really seemed to like it from the martial arts community, given that was it. But I didn't have any inkling that people outside of there, it's kind of a no-brainer. I should have actually made more of an effort, but getting it to the science fiction fantasy community this is all based on SPFBO. So and it lit a fire for me to write the second book, and now the third book, the end of the trilogy. So it's been a big deal.
Yeah, I think I agree. Although I had a small connection with the community, having written short stories before, and I think I'd reached everyone I was going to reach by myself. Let's put it that way, which was probably, I don't know, 100, 200 people who might have heard of me before and be willing to take a try on the book. And beyond that, I genuinely, throughout the first round of SPFBO, where no one really pays attention to the entrants, you definitely see that I'd come to the natural end, I think, of where I was gonna reach on my own, because I'm really bad at marketing. And then we got the semi-final and the final, and that's when it really all kind of took off and people started to actually notice. And I don't know, Justin, kind of, I think you'd probably sold a few more than the rest of us before the competition started. And I don't know about whether the rest of us had really managed anything in terms of marketing.
Yeah, I did want to ask Justin about, because there's a distinct difference in how SPFBO affects books that already have a large audience and following, and the ones who are just kind of getting discovered through the competition. So if I remember right, Justin, yours is the one that had gotten the most reviews, at least before the competition started.
Yeah, I think so. So what I've seen is definitely, like, I used to work in publishing before I published my first book in 2015, but not fiction publishing. It was all non-fiction stuff like magazines and guidebooks and things. So I kind of I had some knowledge of the industry before I started. I knew nothing about marketing, and I've had to learn that as I've gone. And even when Carpe Diem was originally published with a small press, I actually did more of the sort of marketing. I did at least as much marketing myself as the publishers were able to do, because they just had a very small budget to spend on that. So I've been learning how to make Facebook adverts work since 2015, 2016, basically. And so the sales that I've generated have been on the back of that. Now, The Lost War was kind of a different animal because, you know, as I said, it's a completely different genre. So some of the people from Carpe Diem came over to Lost War and liked it as well. And a lot of it with Lost War was also finding new readers as well. But I kind of had a base to start with, which helped. And I've got a little group of other authors that I've been friends with since, you know, 2016, 2017, and we all talk and we compare notes and we give each other advice on what we do. So kind of I'd done a fair bit of that baseline of marketing and getting a foundation of sales before coming in. What I've noticed as a result of this is it's been interesting. So I run an ad per book per country with the US and the UK, basically. And what I've noticed is that so Carpe Diem consistently sells better in the UK than in the US. But since getting to the SPFBO finals, The Lost War massively outsells in the US to the UK. So SPFBO has been a big boost for The Lost War, specifically in the US market, definitely.
That's interesting. Anybody else
have
noted trends like that in the way their book is being consumed?
Well, this is a bit of an odd one, because when the competition first started, I remember seeing reviews by some of the bloggers saying, "Oh, this book doesn't have any reviews on Goodreads. I'm so excited that I get to be the first." I just come off the back of, because my book came out May 10th, so it was right at the start of the competition, and I'd spent about 3-4 months really pushing with ARC reviewers. I was like, oh, I wish I hadn't now, because, you know, it's kind of a nice thing to go into the competition with no reviews and see how it lands. And what I found was that before I'd entered the competition, I had this view that I didn't understand the nuance of the fantasy audiences out there. I kind of thought my book is fantasy, therefore people who like fantasy will like my book. And what the competition has shown me is how that's really not the case. It's taught me that there's these great niches within fantasy. So I really recommend everyone enter the competition just to try and see. You'll get a great insight into how your book, the type of books you're writing, how they land, who they won't land with. Because I realized that, you know, there's a lot of people who are following the competition because they're fans of Mark's work. So the competition has a naturally, you know, a grim, dark slant to it in terms of the people following it, which is great. It's just, it shows me, my book maybe doesn't land so well with grimdark. That's great. I'm going to take that learning into the future to not market necessarily in that way. So there's lots of learnings you can get from it as well, not just about what's working.
I was similar in that I didn't have any reviews. I think I used the competition as a push to actually get the book out there, because one thing you don't have with not having a publisher is deadlines. And for me, that's massive. So I was like, okay, well, let's enter SPFBO and that will make a deadline. So literally I was like getting it all up there a few days before the deadline. Had no reviews, nothing. So yeah, it was like, let's see what happens.
Yeah, I was the same on it, on the deadlines as well, because I was actually, my book I had originally scheduled to come out in June, and then when the deadline for SPFBO came out, I just kind of, I pushed it back 2 weeks earlier so I could submit it, and I was doing my kind of final line edits like the day before the competition opened, and I actually had COVID at the time, so I had a massive fever at the same time. So I was trying to do all this stuff to get it done, just so we could enter it. And yeah, it was quite fun. And I have no idea what the book would have been like if I had not had a fever while doing it. But
my experience was pretty similar as well. I mean, I published in, I think it was March 19th or something, just like 2 or 3 months before the competition. And this was my first book I've ever written. I was not a part of any fantasy community. I mean, I like reading fantasy, but I didn't really know anything about marketing or anything. It was never a plan to really try to make it a big thing. It was like, I just have the story that I want to write. I think it'd be fun. And so I wrote it, and I ended up joining a writing group shortly after that. And that's where kind of found out about the competition. And 5 of the 6 of us joined the competition in our writing group, and I was lucky enough to go forward, which was pretty cool. But yeah, like I mean, I didn't have many reviews. I didn't really have a plan on how to get reviews. I didn't even know like about ARC reviewers, Rachel. So you beat me there. Book 2, luckily enough, I had ARC reviewers there. Now I know better.
You've got a sign up thing, haven't you? You're like, on your website, like, do you want to be my ARC reviewer? I was like, I almost clicked it to be like, yeah, send me a copy. I want to do this.
I would. But yeah, the visibility has been incredible. Like I never would have had this many eyes on the book. And it really kind of made the whole situation of like being an author more serious for me, which I think is probably the coolest part. Like I had started being an author kind of with the intent of it being this fun side thing. I mean, I have a very intense day job, so I have to do it when my kids are asleep at night. And now it's like a much more serious kind of hobby for me, and it's awesome. So it's been really cool.
All right, so sort of related, is there, like, based on your experience in SPFBO, I guess it's not that related, but are there any changes you're making to your writing or your marketing, just based on this experience? I'm sort of jumping backwards in the conversation and my brain is a mess. And I know several of you have redone your covers, so I'd love to hear about that. And then any other things you've sort of adjusted in your approach to either writing or marketing based on SPFBO.
Both of the covers behind Zack are now out of date. That's like
only one of them.
No,
this one.
That's my new cover.
This is the new cover.
No, I meant. Oh no.
This is a new cover.
Yeah, that's true. One of them.
This is the old cover.
There's the new one.
Hey.
It is.
I'm outsourcing my marketing to Zack. He's gonna just have my book in every video call he ever does.
Yeah, Zack, do you like BookTube, or is that just beautiful for no reason?
My wife is a booktuber. So if you've ever watched a video from Bookborn, that is secretly my wife. And she actually recently did a video about SPFBO, which I would highly suggest if anybody is more curious about how the competition works.
I'm a little bit
unbiased.
It was a great video. I was
Of
like,
course.
She's the best, right?
yes, I know.
Was cool. Yeah, so the cover thing was, I mean, the cover thing was not actually directly related to SPFBO, but it did, what did make me sort of instigate me doing it was the cover competition. And I looked at the cover competition and the stuff that was in there, and I liked my original cover, but there was a couple of things about it that I think were problematic from just from a marketing sales perspective, particularly at thumbnail size on a screen. It was too dark, and it just didn't work as a thumbnail, which I hadn't considered when I was, okaying it originally. And I had already started to think that maybe I need to do something about this. And then I saw the cover competition, and I actually went with De Monza, who won the competition. I went to them, was like, look, I want to redo this, and what I want to do is get a new style, something much more bright and eye-catching, and then I want to keep that. I want to set that style and keep that for the rest of the trilogy. So I'm going to be going back to them again for the next two books as well. So it was slightly inspired by the cover competition, but I really was already thinking I need to do something about this cover because it's just too dark.
Yeah, I changed mine as a direct result of the competition, as well as just overall reviews. There was a prevailing thought that the old cover, this old cover here, which is behind Zack, was kind of like a ripoff of the Hunger Games, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because I think some of the audience that would be attracted to like dystopian YA also have enjoyed combat codes. So I think that was the original thought. But due to the cover competition, there was some good feedback there that I definitely took to heart, as well as just overall reviews, and just learning about like passive marketing, which is, again, something through the network of authors that I've made through this competition, as well as listening to reviewers, how important passive marketing is, which is essentially the fixed capital that you put into marketing efforts, like a cover, like the formatting of your book, that you not like an ongoing marketing effort that will then increase the throughput of all your ongoing marketing efforts. So that made a lot of sense to me. Like, you pay a certain amount, and depending on the artist, but then once you have that new cover, that's gonna make the rest of your ongoing marketing efforts that much more efficient. And again, that makes a lot of sense to me. So I didn't make the cutoff to get the cover into the actual collage, but that's okay. And we're redoing all the covers for the whole trilogy, so that's exciting.
I'm not planning on redoing my cover. I like my first book cover, but talking with all you guys about your thoughts on your covers, what you're updating, the artists behind the cover, has kind of helped me with thinking. I'm pretty close to having my next series. I need a book one cover. So for example, I know Patrick used Zack's designer, and kind of we traded notes. So that's been good, and just in terms of community, us kind of talking about artists and what works well in terms of marketing.
Yeah, my whole strategy with everything is just to copy what Zack's doing, because he's really dynamic and I'm not really dynamic. And no, my cover was my original cover, which I do have, but I think it's propping up my computer at the moment, so I'm not going to get it out. Is it was again done in a hurry, like everything, in order to get done on time. So I did the cover myself for the first one. I got a couple of stock images and
really
kind of stuck them together.
It does not look like it. It looks really good.
Yeah, I liked it, and I still like it, but I thought it didn't really reflect the book. I thought, the book is more fun, I think, than I think the cover makes it look. The cover makes it kind of a bit gloomy and dark, and it's also kind of really cliched with the kind of guy with the hooded cloak on.
It looks a lot more typical fantasy, the first one, whereas the new one, it's something electric about it. It's different. It's like it's keeping with the tone.
Yeah, I wanted something which was more dynamic and looked like more action involved in it. So, and I also was starting to think about a book 2 cover, and I didn't trust my own skills to be able to produce another illustration from stock images that looked like it went with the first one. So I thought I would commission covers for book 1 and book 2 at the same time, and try and get ones that are in the same style.
I find this fascinating because I use covers when I'm stuck with the writing, but I'm like, I need to be working on the book somehow. I'm like, I'll just design a new cover. So I'll just start like doing another one, and it's quite fun.
You did your own, didn't you, Rachel?
Yeah, those two. I've got another book coming out soon, which I'm in love with the cover, and I keep wanting to just share it with people. I'm like, no, because the writing is terrible. You need to fix the words before you can share the cover for that one.
You can share it in the Discord server, and we'll all just keep
Yes.
it quiet. It's fine. You can just show it to us.
Definitely. As soon as we're off, I'll be like, guys, what do you think? What do you think?
Do it.
I could talk about covers all day. It's probably a good time to mention that I'm a cover designer in my day job. But very much like, I think they say dentists' children have terrible teeth. My cover is just terrible. It was like really rushed to get it ready for SPFBO. So I just kind of threw it down. And then I think we did a promo with UML, I think. And you gave some very excellent, if I may say, feedback on clicks and stuff like that. Was it you?
Yeah. So for those watching, what I did with that is we, us folks, and a bunch of other former SPFBO finalists did a 99-cent sale together, and I kept track of which covers got clicks. Of course, I have no idea which of those converted to sales, like, because I don't have that data, but just what covers, when presented on a big page together, people clicked on. And then I went and I divided that into a bunch of other stuff, like, okay, so which color do people like the best? It was blue. Green was at the bottom. I was a bit offended by that. I don't know what the problem is with green. I really like green. And then like how covers with human figures performed as opposed to landscapes, as opposed to graphic designy covers. So much like Alex's Hunger Games-y cover, as opposed to one with a bunch of cool looking guys standing on the cover. So I sort of track the difference, and that's what Shaun is referring to.
Yeah, the human form on the cover is a very well known plus on selling anything in our genre. But yeah, the stuff about colors and darkness and contrast and stuff, it all makes perfect sense. But for my cover, I think we just upped some reds and blues. Eventually we'll get around to replacing it, but at the moment it's all about the next book. And I don't know, once I've put a book out there, it's just like I can't think about it really, and so I'm almost like bye, you're gone. So it's very difficult for myself to motivate to focus on on marketing or anything really of stuff I've got out there already.
Funny how that works, isn't it? Once you've got one book out, you're already on to the next one, and that's the one you're thinking about. And it's almost like that it's a child that you put out into the world, and like, yeah, you're fine. I've got to focus all my attention on this one. Everyone wants to talk to you about that child, but you're like, no.
I have the opposite problem where I get too focused on the book I've already written, and I have trouble going to the next one. I'll focus too much on the marketing, and it's tough for me to put it aside.
I would say I would lean towards that as well, Alex. I definitely get a bit caught up in looking at book sales and reviews and marketing and stuff for the book that's out, instead of actually one of my, I don't know if this is a universal thing, but one of my other authors just got this thing called WIBO, would I be better off writing? And it's regularly a thing I have to ask myself is, am I doing something productive or should I just be writing?
I do think one of the gone.
Oh no, go ahead, because I was about to move to a different topic, but you go ahead.
I was going to say one of the advantages I think of self-publishing is this thing of being able to try out new covers and see whether they actually help your book at all or not. And you can have a new cover out, and if you don't think it's working, then a few months later you can change it. I mean, you don't want to change all the time, but you do have this kind of flexibility in the way you present your book, and I think that can be quite a good thing. Because when once you, yeah, I think it's okay to go with it. Basically, I kind of feel like when I change my covers, I'm doing an experiment, and if it doesn't work, then I can move on and do another one, and hope not to offend too many people who bought the previous version. But you know, they have a first edition or whatever, and one day it'll be worth a lot of money.
Exactly, that's the way. It's gonna be somebody's grandchildren's inheritance. That
exactly.
But it was such conviction. I love it.
So we've been talking a lot about what people have learned through the course of this competition. Sort of jumping off that, do you folks have any advice for authors currently prepping for SBO at SPF? See, this is why I say SPFBO. SPFBO 7. Do you have any advice for authors currently prepping for SPFBO 7? Or is it a fool's errand to try and plan too much?
Oh, I have one quick one. Don't rely on Scrivener for typo and spelling. Don't rely on a family member who says they're really good at grammar because it turns out they're not. And you will get called up on that, and you will almost not make it into the finalists because of that. And you won't be able to change it, which is the annoying thing, because once you've submitted a finalist copy, your entry, you can't go back and be like, sorry about all the typos. So, you know, if you can't afford to pay for an editor, then there's so many fantastic tools out there. There's a few that I like, have Word read it aloud to you, because then you'll hear things you're like, whoa, quick, change those. And there's a few online softwares. So basically, make sure you go through your book as many times as possible. Just, you don't want that to be harming your score. You really don't.
I would say, and I totally get what you're saying, if you can't afford it, if you can possibly afford it, if you can scrape the money together, get an editor, get a proofreader, get a cover designer, because not just for SPFBO, but for everything, like those three things, you will never regret investing those in your book, because if you get them wrong, nobody will read your book. So those three things, I would say. And I would also say, kind of slightly going against what a couple of people have already said, I would say don't rush to get a book out for this year's competition, because if you rush it out, you can't change it, as Rachel said. So you could well regret having rushed it and then realize that you've done something wrong. So I would say invest in those things if you can, find alternatives if you can't, and don't rush it. Wait till you're absolutely sure your book is the best it can be before you think about entering it.
I'd just like to point out that I rushed my book over a period of 4 years. So...
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Although I rushed mine, I think you should, in general, you shouldn't rush it. Absolutely. There were definitely
you have to be a genius like Patrick
that.
to get away with rushing it, basically.
Yes.
There's an element to rushing a book out if you're at all trad published. You know, you're going to have deadlines, and
sure, yeah.
There's that element of it, I think. So I don't know. The trouble with books is they're never finished. I could easily work on a book for 20 years, and it still wouldn't be ready.
That's the thing, is you get a review and they mention something, you're like, oh, I had that niggling feeling about that. I wasn't able to put it in words, but you've just pointed out exactly what I should have done, and now I want to cry and take the book back. You know, it's like people are going to see these things, but you could keep editing them forever and ever. Maybe it's worth it.
I remember somebody saying, you never really finish writing a book, you just let it go.
Yeah, no, nothing is completed, it's just abandoned.
That's it.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, I think for me, I've been trad published before, not in adult stuff. I've done children's books before, and I think one of the things I learned from that is when to stop on a book. And mainly because I wasn't given a choice. You know, your book is due. You have, this is a date it's going to be turned in, and you get it as good as you possibly can by that point, and turn it in. So, in some ways, you have to balance that with what Justin's saying of not rushing, but also don't spend forever on your book. because particularly if you're just starting, fiddling about with the same book forever won't make you much better, whereas finishing one book and then moving on to a second one will make you better. So kind of you've got a balance between getting it right and also stopping and starting something new.
Agreed, definitely.
So I'm going to take a little time before our final question to hop over to the chat, and I know there are some really good questions in here, and they're mostly buried in people saying nice stuff about you folks and about Zack's wife's BookTube channel. So if you haven't looked at it, I do recommend you do that at some point. So David Swanson asks, what type of stories and voices are we getting from the self-published industry that aren't found in the traditional published industry? What's the comparative advantage of self-publishing? Okay, that second one is broad.
It's a really good
but
question.
Anybody want to take those?
Yeah, they're the books that aren't that the traditional publishers don't see a market for. It's things like, you know, so my stuff's about like mental health problems a lot, and that it's not really that the publishers know how to publish that. They don't know how to market it. The audience isn't pre-built like it is for, say, grimdark. So it's not a wash, rinse, repeat like they can do so easily with their other books. So self-published books, they are they're different. They're the things that you're not going to find on the bookshelves. They're the things that maybe there's a really small niche audience for it, but they're really exciting.
I saw a tweet recently along the lines of the traditional publishing industry will on the one hand say we want to hear unique original voices and stories, and on the other hand say, but who are you like so we know how to market you?
Yeah. It's painful, isn't it? Because they ask you and you're like, well, I'm not really like that many others. I'm trying to find comp authors, but like you've asked me to go full hog in for all my creativity. I feel like the next one I'm looking at is I've created a world of fungi.
Yeah,
can you compare that to?
Is it Game of Thrones but with plants, or is it Game of Thrones but with dolphins?
ML, I know we as a group have talked about your book, Sword of Kaigen, and how it certainly, for all the accolades it's got and how great it is, it's certainly not a traditional book that fits into a very specific, neat category. So that's just a great example of how traditional publishing might not pick up on something because of the very uniform markets that they're looking for.
Yeah, and I think that's true. I did not attempt to get any of my books traditionally published, so I can't be like, oh, they didn't want me, curse them. I didn't offer, so I can't actually speak to that. But there, and I think you need to draw a distinction between books where you're just creatively doing what you want, and then there are books that really, really do serve a niche and have an audience and make lots of money. And I think in large part, I could be wrong about this, but in large part, martial arts fantasy, like what you've written, is bigger, much bigger in self-publishing than in traditional publishing. You have traditionally published books with martial arts elements that, like, if you've watched a lot of anime or something, you can see where they've borrowed, but they're not really marketed as such. And in self-publishing, not only do you have martial arts, but you have martial arts subgenres,
right?
And
I think
all of them have really a lot of high performing books in them.
It's weird because if you look at, I don't know if people are familiar with Cradle, Will White's series, but like his book, the latest book, I think it was number 9, that's number 1, not in sci-fi fantasy, number 1 in the Kindle store, entire Kindle store, better than, like, I don't know, John Grisham and all,
better than
Nora
everyone.
Roberts. Exactly. So it's like, you'd think traditional publishing would have like tried to create a clone of that with all their resources by now, given how wildly successful that series has been, not to mention a bunch of other series, but that kind of baffles me, actually.
Yeah, I
yeah.
think one of the other things that in self-publishing, basically, it's a pro and a con, but people do what they want to do. You know, you're very rarely, you know, if you publish something traditionally, you'll be expected then to follow it up with something else, which is fairly similar. You know, and if you're not careful, you'll then be expected to write that book over and over again for the rest of your life. In self-publishing, you have, like Justin said, his first one was a comedy fantasy. His second one is a kind of epic fantasy, and so on. And because people are doing exactly what they want and writing the stories they want to write, you're probably getting some more unique stories. And on the downside, you're probably also getting some really bad stories as well. So you're kind of I think there's more diversity in types of stories, and maybe it's also just because of size. You know, traditional publishing will only publish a certain number of books each year, and of those, only a tiny handful will actually get a meaningful publicity push. There'll be other books that are published that nobody knows about because they don't get publicity, they don't get on the bookstores or anything like that. So traditional publishing is focusing on a very small number of books that they believe have commercial appeal. Whereas if you're self-publishing it, you're basically publishing pretty much anything. And if there are readers out there, then there is a way of finding those readers. And Will White is an excellent example, obviously, because I don't know if he had tried to submit that series, whether it would have been picked up by anyone. I doubt it. I think the books are probably too short. They're probably, I don't know, they don't fit in quite as well. So yeah, so I think it's kind of interesting in that way, in that you can find almost anything in self-published fantasy, if you know how to find it.
And I think readers love that. I mean, that's good news for us as authors too, right? Like, yes, we can put out a variety, but it's clear from the market over the past couple of years is readers want to find new things, different things. They want a different voice. So I'm glad we can give that to them.
So this person and I'm so sorry, I can't read what I think is Hebrew, so I don't know their username. You guys are awesome. Do you have recs for indie adult fantasy that you really like and is underhyped? And that's basically identical to one of my closing questions, which was whether you folks wanted to plug the work of one of your fellow finalists or some other SPFBO entry, or I guess some other adult self-published fantasy book.
If you've already gone through the finalist books, check out the semi-finalists. There are so many fantastic ones in there that I'm like, they need to be recognized. Radio, there's what's the one? It's got blackbirds on the cover. They're fantastic. They really are.
Not River of Thieves.
Blackbird
That
Sing?
was
Yes, Blackbird Sing. Yeah.
I'm a ridiculously slow reader, and I am still working my way through the other finalist books. But on the basis that the two genres I read are fantasy and mystery thriller, you'll be unsurprised to know that I am a big fan of Patrick's work. So there you go. Which doesn't mean I don't like all the other ones. I just realized I should probably qualify that.
No, of course
Patrick's is right in my niche of like snarky comedy, thriller, mystery, stroke fantasy. It's like, yes, this ticks all the boxes for me.
Yeah, I've read 5 of the other finalists so far, and 4 of them are here in our chat right now. And I'm currently reading The Lost War as well, so I'm making my way through. And I think it's hard because they are all so very different, which I think is also kind of especially cool this year. Like almost, I don't think there's any 2 books that really are like similar. Like the genres are different, like within fantasy. The writing is very different between them all. I mean, Rachel's doing first person, and I don't know if I'd have one that I would choose. And honestly, all of them are good. I know it's a terrible answer, and that's not what people want to hear, but they're all good.
Which one did you read, Zach?
I've read Last Memoria, Fall of Erelon, Combat Codes, Shadow of a Dead God, and Blackstone Heart.
Sweet.
So far.
Okay, and we've got 5 minutes left. So, and I think I am supposed to do a closer. before that, what is up next for you folks? Any sequels or brand new projects we should be looking out for? And where is the best place to follow you for updates?
Should we go around? I'll go first and nominate.
Yeah,
So I've got the sequel called Scars of Cerebra coming out on May 10th, which I'm super excited about. It's going even further into how much memories define who we are. And I feel so sorry for the characters. I'm so glad they're not real, because they would kill me if I'd done this to them in real life. And then I've got, hopefully, the World of Fungi stuff, which is called Sakara Nights, coming out later in the year, which just need to finish the words. Got to make that polished. And if you want to follow me, Rachel Emershaw on whatever social media, I'm probably on it. Yeah. Robert, do you want to go next?
Sure. So like I said at the beginning, my SPFBO entry series is complete. So that finished back in January, but my next project that I'm now going through the slog of editing on is a new world, a new series based on ancient Rome. It's still military fantasy, but kind of going back to more the roots of normal epic fantasy or military fantasy. Who knows when that will be out? We were speaking about rushing for the next SPFBO competition. I maybe could rush it before June when the next competition starts, but I don't think I'm going to make it. I need to do editing and paid editing and beta reading and all that stuff too. So look
and
for something.
Give your heart a break from the
so
review
maybe
anticipation stress.
2 years I'll hopefully be able to enter, but I'm hopeful for this summer for the next release date. Yep.
Okay. I've got a side story coming out set in the same universe, following one of the characters from Netherlight. It's a little bit shorter and punchier, I would say. I've got another series I'm working on as well. The second book on that will be coming out hopefully later, very later on this year. Yeah, that's about it really. Okay, Zack?
I just released book 2 4 days ago. So hot off the press, Stones of Light. Yeah, picks up right where Voice of War left off with all of the chaos. And now I'm working on book 3. So that's what I'm doing. Let's go, Justin.
I am currently 200,000 words into the supposedly 150,000 word sequel to The Lost War, which is supposed to be out in June and isn't going to be. Yeah, so the sequel is called The Insurgent King. It will be out this year. I just have to figure out where it finishes, and it's probably going to end up being somewhere near 250,000 words in the first draft, and I don't know if I'm going to. I don't know when that's going to finish, but I will finish it. So yeah, that's what I'm working on. It's ended up a much bigger story than I intended it to be, because I kept having new ideas that I wanted to put in while I was writing it, and so there we are. So yeah, that's my next thing. It should be out this year. Well, will be out this year. And then I'll be straight on to writing the third book, which I will not overwrite in the same way that I have this one, obviously. And I will say, Alex, you go next.
Thank you. I've already written the sequel to Combat Codes that's out now, called Griever's Blood. And actually a bunch of SPFBO judges have gone on to read it and really enjoyed it. It's kind of expands the world and the character POVs quite a bit. And the third book in the series is actually currently in copy editing right now. I'm hoping to push it to mid-June for a release if everything works out. And also there's going to be a new cover reveal for Griever's Blood, and hopefully that will be soon. I'm just waiting on the it's being done by Felix Ortiz and Shaun King, and we're closing in on a cover design. So excited to release that, hopefully not too long. And I think Patrick is the only one left.
Oh, you're on mute.
Oh no, Patrick. You gotta unmute.
No, please mime it. Someone else translate as he talks.
Ask to. There we go.
Am I unmuted now? I don't even know how I muted. Someone muted me.
I
Can't
swear
say I blame
did
you.
not.
Okay, I'm working on the sequel to Shadow of a Dead God. It's called Nectar for the God. It's I'm still writing it. It's going to come out this year, but I don't know exactly when. This year has been slow for all sorts of reasons, including obviously having kids at home all the time and trying to do a job at the same time and all that kind of stuff. So, but by the end of the year, definitely it will be out. Then I'll be writing the third one, I guess. At which point I'll probably need to write something else, or I'm going to go mad.
All right. Well, that is our time. Thank you so much for being such a fun group of panelists. You did most of my work for me, and that is exactly what I wanted. So, yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much to everybody who showed up in the chat. This is to date the most fun chat that I've gotten to follow as a moderator. Closing, don't forget to check out our artist alley at quarrencon.com. No, quarrencon2020.com. And this is the first of a whole bunch of panels. I'm going to be on a Magic Systems panel later today. I think some of these lovely folks are going to be on panels as well. So the schedule for all of those can also be found at quarrencon2020.com. And I will see you all later. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Yes, thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
See ya.
Nice to see everyone.